Do you know how you make CLion show you types like QString or a QList of integers? And do you know how to make it show your own types? Watch this episode and I'll tell you. It is actually on by default, but just in case it doesn't show for you, Control-Alt-Shift, and here is your settings. Type Qt up here, and debugger, data view, C++, enable Qt renderer. That's what they call pretty printers inside of CLion, and it is on by default. That was a short episode, but you can create your own. And I have a long episode inside of Qt widgets and more on how to do that with the pretty printers that are specific for Qt Creator. CLion decided not to have their own format for this. Instead, they simply use the pretty printers from the underlying debugger, namely either GDB or LLDB. In this episode, I added a bunch of debuggers for GDB, but the same process would work just fine for LLDB, likely with a different syntax though. So before I show you how these renderer or pretty printers, as they are called in GDB, looks like, let me just show you a bit of code that I have for showing those renderer. So you can see here, I have a file for instantiating a number of value classes I have in my code base. I have money here in the currency of euro and their system amount. And over here, you can see the pretty printed version of this. So it just says 1235, because I decided my pretty printer should not show me decimals. I could have made it do that too. And you can even notice that there is this arrow here, so I can open it up to see all the actual values. This is what it would have given me had I not had my pretty printer. And just scroll down, here is a month, for example, December 24, it's year 24, it's month 12, and it's pretty printed like this. And there's a month range and a date range, and I have a number of different, here's a percentage. And if you're wondering, yes, but seriously, why do you want a percentage class? Well, head over to Qt widgets and more, where I talk about how I have value classes returned from my models in model view setup, and those can be rendered inside of my views, or I can use them in different ways. So here I have this one, and again, you can see how they are rendered. And here, there's one where it actually takes the digits into account. So when I'm not standing here talking to you, I am actually a director in KDAB. And that means that I am one of those evil managers that run around and take credit for something I didn't do myself. So let me show you some code that I didn't write myself. This was all vibe coded, but it did work out pretty well. I pointed my Claude code to my core directory where all my value types are located in, and I asked it to spit out pretty printers for all of these, and it did actually a pretty good job. So this is where, well, it all starts in this file here, in my .gdb init. I say source this this file here, and this file here is then the one that sets up all the pretty printers. I have one for money, date, range, currency, and so on, and it registers them here. It goes and say GDB printing, blah, blah, and KDAB, that is, if you go and write info pretty minus printer, it will show you all of these pretty printers. And if it matches money, then it should be using the money printer. If it matches date range, it should use the date range printer, and so on. And let's just go and look at money printer here. Money printer is actually subclassing, this is Python code, subclassing from KDB pretty printer, and KDB pretty printer implements a few methods here. So it has this instantiation with the actual value that is being pretty printed. I have no idea what display hint is, but when I started doing this, it spit out this code for me for each and every pretty printer. And I said, I want a super class for this, because more important, this here is the child. This is the code that makes sure that I can open up my values. Remember how when I was looking here, I could open up a percentage value here, for example, and see the actual instance variables inside my percentage value. And then my money printer here is my money printer. Implement a toString that then prints out, and it goes and reads the m_is value from that object, cast it to a Boolean, and remember that in is value is valid, and if not, it returns the string invalid here. Otherwise, it goes and fetches a number of different things, and that is just pure normal GDB pretty printing stuff that I know very little about. I could read the code and validate that it looks okay, and that's good enough for me, because at the end of the day, this is not production code. So if there is a bug in here, then it's a bug in the pretty printer, and I'll definitely easily find that when I look at my code in the debugger, and I can always press the arrow down button to see the actual value of the underlying type. There was one pretty printer that I needed to do more than just what the wipe coding had shown, and that was my employee class. My employee class is a very simple class that basically wrapped an integer, and that's just to make sure that I do not confuse employees and projects because they were two integer, project ID and employee ID. Now I've wrapped them. But in addition to that, when I see an employee class in my debugger, what I do not want is to print out that it's employee ID 20, like it does down here. We do not have anybody with employee ID 12345, so it just shows you UID 12345. But if it's a valid employee ID, which is yours truly here, then it will actually go and look up what is the employee behind that employee ID. I would be very hard at work if I were to figure out how to do that from a pure GDB pretty printer, just looking at memory location. So I'm cheating here. I'm actually calling a method that is called toGDBstring on my employee element here. Let me just show you that part of it. So my employee here, it has a blah 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 toGDBstring const char pointer. It's a const method. toGDBstring. It takes my full name here for the employee and convert that to UTF-8. That's a byte array. I keep it as static to avoid accessing dangling pointers, and then I return that to my GDB. So now all I need to do in my pretty printer is to fetch or to get that my hands onto the employee, and then call that method. And that looks like this, if I can find it. Employee printer. So my toString, that's where things is going on. I will go and fetch the employee ID, and if it's -1, which is the special case of nobody, and now you might be saying, well, Jesper, if you changes it to 0, that should be nobody in the future, your pretty printer will no longer work. And yes, that is the playing field of these pretty printers, I'm afraid. But I will go and check if it's -1 and print nobody. Otherwise, I will go and, let me just be brutally honest with you and say I did not look up all the API here, but I'll go and fetch the employee. And I'll get a pointer to that employee that we have here, the type of that, blah, 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 blah. I will go and I will blah, 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 blah. You heard all of that, right? And now I have the address here of that object that I'm actually interested in. I will cast that address to something that looks like this up here, employee pointer, this one, toGDBstring, and I will ask my GDB to call that. And it will return something that I will, well, this is a string, it will call that, and here is my result. I'll go and ask for the string of that result, which then will be the actual Jesper Pedersen, if that is what it is. Oh, that's a cool thing here. If this do not work, if I'm in a try-catch block here, if, for example, I'm debugging a core file, then I cannot start executing, and it will just throw an exception saying, sorry, you cannot call into the binary because the application is totally dead by now, then it will just go and take that employee ID and show it there. So it actually also works in post-mortem debugging. That is pretty nifty, and I cannot urge you enough to create debug helpers for your application, because it is just so much easier when you sit there deep in your thoughts and you are like, so with the overtime calculation here, oh, I'm looking at Jesper, not at Jan. I wouldn't know why I would pick that name. Hi, Jan. He's the one who's reviewing these videos here. Then it's easier to spot, rather than I'm looking at UUID, or not UUID, employee ID number 82 rather than 20. That is more difficult to keep in mind. So that is a pretty nifty trick. Not very much to do with CLion besides that. That is how you do it here. And I showed you for GDB. I could very likely have vibe coded up the exact same thing for LLDDB. So go ahead and find your favorite AI to help you out there. I'm Jesper Pedersen from KDAB. I hope you also enjoyed this episode here. And until next time, you know what? Have a great time.